Boa noite, senhores seguidores do Hike and Fly Brasil, amigos e amigos do Hike and Fly Brasil. Boa noite. Nós vamos hoje falar com Kinga. Aguardar só a turma chegar um pouquinho mais. Hoje a entrevista será em inglês, hein, turma? Temos uma convidada mais do que especial. Boa noite, Marcelo. Gessé já está por aí. O Lucas Sarracini não foi possível fazer no YouTube, Lucas. Sinto muito. Gabriel Silva, olha, a turma lá de São Chico. Cap, bem-vindo. Cauã, e aí, Cauã, tudo bem, cara? Nossa, uma grande turma aqui. Salve, galera, muito bom tá todo mundo aí. Sussu, a nossa querida revista Hike and Fly, deve ser a Michele. Deixa eu convidar a nossa... Vou convidar aqui a Kinga para entrar conosco. Vamos aguardar só a quem entrar. Já estamos, como fala, Felipinho, tudo bem? Hello. Hey, Kinga, hello.
Hello, guys.
Hi. Really welcome. It's so sunny in your place.
Yes, I'm in Queenstown, New Zealand, the South Island. A lot of sun, a lot of wind and sun today. So not
Wind
exactly
and
paragliding weather, but still pretty beautiful.
yes, you are commenting with us a few moments ago that if it was a flying day, probably this live had to be postponed, right? Because the good days to fly are always a good day to fly.
Absolutely. And we all know that flying has a priority, and then other things come below and behind.
I can agree with that. I could agree with that. I may make some comment on Portuguese, so please don't feel offended. It's just for our public, and I back to English just in the following at the following, okay, in the following minutes.
Sure, yeah.
Turma, hoje a entrevista será em inglês, depois essa entrevista vai ser publicada na revista Hike and Fly, e a gente talvez use os vídeos também para colocar uma legenda, mas para não tornar muito cansativo a tradução e não tradução, vamos conduzir em inglês, o tempo da Kinga também é curto, e depois a gente eventualmente faz a tradução. Mas, se vocês quiserem, mandem perguntas, aproveitem a presença da Kinga aqui e a gente faz as perguntas aí dentro do possível a tradução, tá bom? So, Kinga, you are one of the most known and more renowned famous bivouac adventurous flyer today, paraglider pilot. You participate in Red Bull X-Alps 2019, 2023. Really an inspirational for everyone. So please, could you make a short, and that's for me itself, I'm quite a fan. So thank you very much for your timing, giving this interview to the Revista Hike and Fly Brazil and also Hike and Fly Brazil website. So really, really welcome. Really appreciate your time. So a short introduction to the Brazilian pilots who are here following you and checking this time with you.
Yeah, my name is Kinga MASZTALERZ. It's a tricky name. It's a very Polish name. I'm Polish by origin. Polish language is full of a little bit like Portuguese in some ways. And I'm a physicist by education, and then I did a lot of other things before I discovered paragliding. In particular, I was a very keen rock climber, and I loved mountains and both rock and alpine climbing. And back then, I thought that was just the best thing in the world. And I knew that paragliding existed, but I never knew. And until now, a lot of people don't really understand that we can actually fly somewhere. It's not just flying off the mountain like with a little parachute. You just kind of jump off the plane and just fall slowly. That we can actually fly some distance, fly through the mountains, and use it as a aircraft to cover some distance over the terrain that very often would be very difficult to access and impossible to see from this perspective. So when I was a rock climber, I would think that, well, maybe one day this paragliding seems cool. Maybe when I retire, when I can't climb anymore, because obviously climbing is so much better. And then at some point, I injured my elbow slightly while climbing, couldn't climb for a while. And so I did this paragliding course. And from the very first moment of like, on the training hill, they're not even flights. The first flight are little hops, that you are just kind of 10 meters above the ground. And but I was so hooked, and this whole concept that you can actually have this backpack and hike up even a tiny hill and just fly over it, it's completely blew my mind. And I've been chasing it pretty hard ever since. It was exactly 10 years, almost 11 years ago now. And I've been I never stopped chasing it since then. So I basically quit my job, left my apartment, moved to
your
Italy.
job. Just quit your job, sold your farm, close your apartment,
It
and
was
let's fly.
very responsible decision, but also one of the best things I've ever done. My mom was like, "What about your retirement plan?" I was like, "Well, I will figure it out on the way." And I spent my first season first in Italy and then in France. And that was, and I flew a lot. So I flew probably in my first year around 300 hours, which is pretty impressive if you think about a pilot who is just learning to
400
thermal.
hours.
So I was mostly bombing out, and then trying again. But I was really obsessed. And then at some point with my first spring, which was very turbulent in every sense, after my first spring and intermediate syndrome and the first spring and a lot of close calls, I moved to France. And in France I spent another summer. So my summer, not another summer, it was still like the first year really. And then I started actually flying some proper cross country with some valley crossings and understanding what the wind is and how to find thermals in the mountains and what the valley winds are.
In your second
Sorry?
spring, you were crossing valleys and exploring high mountains.
It was actually after my first spring, because I did my certificate of paragliding license in September, and then I spent the whole winter in Italy, and then I had my first spring, which was pretty wild.
I see.
And then
I can imagine that.
my first summer after this, or like whatever you call it, that was when I went to France. And because of topography there and actually flying in the French Alps, I had to start understanding a little bit more about not just go flying like I would do in Bassano in Italy, with pretty relatively straightforward terrain, because Bassano, I don't know if you guys know, it's pretty popular, especially autumn winter place for European pilots, where you can fly the whole winter in the week, but still thermal activity, and it's very straightforward. So you have basically flatlands, and then you have this ridge, which they call Prealpi, so the first ridge of the Alps growing out of the flatlands, and then you have flatlands all the way until Venice and until the sea, and at the back you have Dolomites and the Alps, but it's protected in various ways from this big mountains protect this terrain from various ways. The wind basically always comes from south in some way. So it's a pretty straightforward way of flying. And even if I imagine that after a lot of hours there and a lot of flights and this in the scratchy conditions, I imagined at this point that I'm already, I already know what it's all about.
Let's go to the French Alps. Let's explore Mont
Exactly.
Blanc.
At first, I went to the Swiss Alps. In April, and the first thing I did, I crashed on a big pine tree because I had no clue really. And then a lot of things happened during this.
Part of the
Trees are actually not so bad. At least they're soft, So we say that every pilot has their tree. So that was mine, 20-meter pine tree over at 2,200 meters in April. Plenty of snow, pretty complicated retrieve. So then I started kind of realizing that, and then I put myself in various other stupid situations, and then I realized that maybe I don't know everything so well, and as a result of various decisions, I ended up in France, and the French Alps actually. I approached it a little bit in a smarter way, with a little bit more respect, and
I see.
and actually started flying proper mountain cross country there. So I flew like my first 100+ kilometer flights and Tour de Mont Blanc in the wrong direction
Yeah.
because I didn't know what
I
again
was
what I
going
was
to
doing.
ask that. First time you did it opposite clockwise, right?
Yes,
And now
you
you
know it.
said,
That's
I noticed, yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
I read.
It's until now, if I had to point the three of my most important flights, that would be one of those, because it was the
Yeah.
first time that if you guys, for those of you who don't know the Mont Blanc Massif, it's obviously the highest mountain in the Alps, and a very serious terrain, and usually the Tour de Mont Blanc, so flying around the Mont Blanc, happens in a clockwise situation,
Hmm.
because you put yourself in this, you follow the valley where Chamonix is for a first while, and then you only commit to the committing terrain when you are sure that the day is working well. It's usually after midday and everything's right, and also you follow the sun, so it all makes perfect sense to do it clockwise.
Yep.
While I didn't quite know this part, I was just like taking it one thermal at a time, and I did anti-clockwise, and in
Hmm.
particular in this situation, basically one of the first things that you do during the flight, not you, no one really does it this way, I did it this way.
Yeah.
You over Col de Miage, and then there's metal glass sea of ice, the glacier,
Yeah.
and it's a very high pass, and I was just kind of passing over it. I didn't really know what was on the other side. I kind of had idea that there's some glacier there, but didn't quite connect how impressive and how committing the terrain is. I've never been over the glacier in a paraglide. It's still my first real
Oh,
my first
so,
real summer.
okay.
So yeah, so when I
Anti-clockwise,
went
first
for
time
it,
over a glacier, pressing through the
yeah, and I
Incali,
took over the Col
exploring
de
everything
Mias, which is pretty high pass, and just kind of
alone,
sunk on the other side.
completely
And then I saw
alone.
this sea of ice. I was like, wow, okay, now let's put the seat in the vertical position. Now the joking is over. Let's focus here. It was the first time I kind of connected to the fact that paraglider, this piece of cloth that fits in your backpack, can really take you over the terrain, that it's very committing, incredible, beautiful, would be very difficult to access otherwise, potentially dangerous, but also you can fly over the places that you definitely wouldn't like to land on. And it was the first
Yeah.
touch of this part of commitment, that because usual when we fly flatlands, when we fly most of usual routes in the usual, like in the Alps or in the usual mountains, there are landing places.
Yes.
You know, it's always what you always hear when you learn flying. Oh, you always need a landing site inside, yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of stunning committing flights in the high mountains. Because I'm not talking only about the Alps. Since then, I've flown a lot of probably more serious and more committing terrain. But this first time connecting to it was just like pretty magical. And then when I landed, when I landed back in the valley
Yeah.
after crossing, after
Back in
touring around, uh,
back in
I
Chamonix,
was
you
a
did
little
the
bit.
full route? You did the full
I did a full
route?
route, but I
Wow.
landed at the end. At the end, I didn't land on the official landing in Chamonix. I landed exactly 5 kilometers short because, of course, I got stuck in the valley wind. That's another reason why you do it
Yeah.
this way, because also you follow valley winds. While
Yes.
when you are coming at the end of the day into Chamonix Valley, if you are coming from the north, you are obviously
Yes.
going into the wind. So I got stuck on my little B wing. It was back then. It was still four-liner, not even three-liner,
I can
four-liner.
imagine.
My
Yeah.
little brave B wing. I got stuck. I landed in the riverbed, and I remember there was this tourist sitting in front of the camper van by the river reading a newspaper, and he just looked at me. It's like, and I was all in my goggles and everything, with this kind of newly discovered magic of flying over glaciers, and I was like, oh my god, it's so incredible.
Wow.
He's like, where are you coming from?
Yeah.
It was pretty funny. So
Just putting the paper down. Yeah.
so that was one of the highlights. Not I did a few interesting for me back then flights on this first summer, but and learned a lot. And then at some point at the takeoff in Annecy, I met a boy, a Kiwi boy who came for holidays to France, and
Mhm.
And long story short, I ended up in New Zealand, and it
Okay.
was kind of in 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 spring, New Zealand spring, because it was autumn in
Uh-huh.
on the northern hemisphere in Europe, kind of the end of season. I was like, oh, let's go to New Zealand. Through China and Australia, we ended up in New Zealand,
Mhm.
and New Zealand is an incredible place. It's
So,
stunning.
y-
Nature is
yeah.
stunning. The mountains are incredible. People are very kind and very nice, and it's
Mm,
very easy to feel like home
mm,
there. So here,
interesting. So
so
let
since then I've been
to put
calling
this
New
thing
Zealand my home.
to put the things more or less in a timeline. So you start the first year flying in Italy. Bassano is a place to fly. Most of the many Brazilian pilots fly in Bassano. They know over
Yeah,
there.
great.
After that,
Yeah.
you spend a great time on the French and Switzerland Alps. That's great. A committed terrain, high mountains, first time on glaciers. And after a few, how many years after your spent some seasons on the Alps, you were flying on New Zealand. When it happened, how
So
many years?
I went there pretty early, and actually, funny that the first year I went there basically next year. So it was technically the exactly a year when I ended up in New Zealand, exactly 1 year after I did my paragliding license
Oh, got it.
in
Okay,
Bassano.
okay, okay,
So it was
okay.
pretty soon.
And
But the same time, first I flew a lot on the coast, on the North Island of New Zealand. We have incredible coast, which was really great for me because this is what a lot of pilots in the Alps lack. It's good ground handling and strong valley and strong
mm,
winds and
mm,
handling yourself in strong winds, both takeoffs and landings and good wind control. So this is where I really believe that west coast of the North Island of New Zealand made me a much safer, more capable pilot, also for the mountains with all the top landing and WAGA training and
mm.
tricky takeoffs and precise landings, etc. So this is where I really understood the dynamics of the wing and how to basically land and take off in the variety of
Anywhere.
conditions.
Yeah,
Um, New Zealand there are two islands in New Zealand, North and South Island. They are
yeah.
dramatically different. Island is basically this ground, green, uh,
Hmm.
green, green hills and rolling hills. It looks a little bit like England or Scotland in some ways.
Got it.
We have a couple of volcanoes, really dramatic volcanoes
Okay.
popping out, but the rest it's a beautiful coastline and kind of hill and flatland flying.
Hmm.
And on the North Island, we have the whole North Island, basically from south to north. There are Southern Alps of New Zealand, and there are very dramatic mountains. They are not the highest mountains in the world. The highest peak, Mount Cook, is only a little bit above 3,700 meters, but
Okay.
it's growing out from the sea level, from the
Sure.
ocean,
I
and.
see. Hmm.
So it's very, very dramatic. There are glaciers, beautiful glaciers.
Wow. Yeah.
There are very dramatic rock faces and very
Mm.
committing valleys and the long valleys that you think sometimes you fly through and you're like, okay, if you land here, that's two
I've been.
days of
I've
getting out.
been.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
yeah, and not much civilization.
Mm.
Most of other mountains that I've ever flown have even in the higher mountains, like in the Andes, you may be in really committing terrain. The air is very serious, and it's definitely nothing to take lightly. But
Yeah.
you can usually see some type of a trail, road, some kind of little village, some type of civilization. In New Zealand, very often you fly, and there's really nothing, not a cow, not a road, not a house, nothing around you. So it makes it makes a makes
Let,
a big impression on a
yeah.
young pilot coming from the Alps.
Let me
And when I saw
me
this Alps,
please allow me
yeah,
to play some questions to highlight it because you are putting really important topics here that would like to explore
yeah,
your experience, and I think that those are really important information. So you were flying in Alps and you felt quite committed to terrain, but you had always civilizations around you, small villages, and we know how Alpes is. You
yeah,
can just have a great cake anywhere over there with a coffee, and you will be okay. Now you are telling me. So now were exploring the New Zealand. You are telling me about the two islands. The North Island is quite a high mountain, really committed as well, hard mountains. And now we are starting to speak a little bit about Andes. Andes is really an important terrain for us because as a Brazilian pilots, we are really trying to fly on Andes on Alps because it's fancy. Everyone good pilot, X-Alps, everything happens on Alps first. But we would like to know more about Andes. It's quite an explored terrain, even for mountain pilots from Brazil. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, so you are comparing this, right? You had a really amazing adventure in Bolivia. So please, I would like to appreciate if you could comment a little bit about Bolivia as well. And New Zealand, you are telling me that New Zealand is even more remote. You feel even more isolated in flying in the mountains of North Island in Zealand. Oh, New Zealand. Than in Andes, I would suppose exactly the opposite because Andes is so far away, 6,000 meters. You see, we are Latin America, not much money to develop all the corners of the mountains. How you feel the difference
Absolutely.
between this difference
Absolutely.
between
That's a
these
very
two?
interesting
Yeah.
question. It's a very interesting question because each mountains, usually people focus on the altitude of the mountains or
Hmm.
saying like, well, if it's higher, it must be kind of wilder or more impressive. So, it depends, yeah. European Alps are definitely the most developed and populated mountains we can imagine, and there's
Sure.
incredible infrastructure. So because of it, flying is easy. Let's say,
Yeah, yeah.
if
Agree.
you think about the logistics around it, there are cable cars, there are roads through every passes. There's plenty of roads generally in every valley. There's a village and refugio and a restaurant with a Apfelstrudel, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of help. Mountains themselves and the air, it's still not to be treated lightly. They're serious mountains, and
Sure.
depending on the day, they can be absolutely dangerous and can bite you pretty hard. Of course, if you fly in a fan, if you fly into some big clouds, etc., if you fly into some size, they can absolutely bite your head off.
Yeah.
But at the same time, on a good day, to fly a distance, I don't know if you want to fly your first 50, 100, 200 kilometers in the Alps, you pick a good day, you go to a good place, and there is a 50 or 100 other pilots who will show you the way. You
I
can
agree.
fly
Mhm.
relatively on a good day. Of course, it's not to be taken lightly,
Sure.
and
Sure.
it's still a serious mountain flying. But
Yeah.
there's no remoteness in the Alps,
Got
in the
it.
European Alps. It's a
100%
very
agree.
different approach to flying. So you
Mhm.
can, for example, go bivac in the Alps, but so again, it's a very different concept than going bivy in the Andes, in the Himalayas, in the Southern Alps. Now, we started with New Zealand Alps, so just a quick peek into it. New Zealand Alps are not the biggest mountains. And they're pretty narrow, but at the same time they have very complicated weather system because we are on an island. Not only we have normal meteorological wind and valley winds, but also we have a sea breeze coming both from Tasman, from the west, from Tasman Sea, and from the Pacific Ocean from the east. And all these factors combined can make literally every day completely different, and you will constantly surprise. And until now, after a decade of flying here, every season, every cross country flight, I'm still like, what's happening here? Where's this wind coming
But
from? And then you try to
oh,
decipher it. This is why it never gets boring, but
yeah.
this is also why sometimes it happens that you hit some northwest wind coming over some random pass, and you land, for example.
Uh-huh.
And if you land in the New Zealand mountains, somewhere in the backcountry, good part is that you can land anywhere. There's basically no valley, no trees in the valleys, no
Wow.
issues. In the Swiss Alps, if sometimes the landings itself are the most demanding because there
Yes.
are cables, very narrow
Yes.
valleys surrounded by high mountains. There's a lot of valley winds. Sometimes you're flying backwards, and there are like cables, houses, etc.
Got
But
it.
once you're on the road, on the ground in the valley, then you just basically take a bus back to your car or whatever, yeah, or take a train, or it's easy. The logistics is easy. In New
Mhm.
Zealand, it's exactly opposite. You can land basically anywhere, especially if you're happy landing on the slope, because there's only tussocks, there's no trees, there's no obstacles. But
Okay.
then it really matters, okay, at the last moment, if you landed on this or that side of the valley, because it can make a day of difference in the way if you can get out or not, depending on the weather, depending on the logistics, and depending how good your legs are and your orientation, the terrain. So in
Yeah.
some ways, it's way more, in some ways it's safer because you can really land anywhere if you wish. But in some other ways, it's a very natural to fly these
I
mountains
see.
in the backcountry in the bold bivac mode because
Yeah.
there's a big chance that if you land somewhere out there, you will have to spend the night out.
Yeah, I
And
see.
if you are prepared for it, both with the gear and kind of your mindset, it becomes a cool adventure and
Sure.
not necessarily a struggle. And if you are not, it becomes a very scary experience, especially if you're coming straight from the Alps. Now,
Great.
the Andes are, of course, very, Andes are big, yes? So we can talk about
Yeah.
Andes, we can talk about the edge of it, which is still very populated, or we can talk about some very serious terrain and very remote terrain, and very remote high
Sure, sure.
glaciers
Yeah,
and things. And it
yeah,
involves
but
high altitude flying.
yeah, but
So this itself makes a massive difference.
yeah.
That you can get hypoxia. When I came to Bolivia and just staying in La Paz, I was suffocating walking around.
Yeah, tell
And
us a bit about your adventure in Bolivia. So you started in La Paz. You landed there and you started your adventure there.
no, I started in Lima and I spent the
Oh, in
first
Lima.
month basically cruising through Peru. It
Mm.
was still pretty early in season, in post monsoon, let's say post wet
Mm.
season,
Mm.
um, and it was still a lot of humidity in the mountains in the Alps. So I spent the first couple of weeks basically cruising on the coast, flying over
Yeah.
Lima city like a black
Yes, yes.
vulture, and then going to all these places like some dunes on Huacachina and the cliffs around and plenty of other places. I had to Arequipa, and basically my first connection with the mountains and for touch of the mountains of Peruvian Andes was the um, I'm just thinking what's the name of the
Oh,
closest town there, because of course,
in Lima, you mean?
sorry.
No, 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 sorry, I lost you a few seconds, but please go ahead. So you spent some time in the
Yeah,
coastal
yeah,
flights because
yeah.
there was
In
a
the
lot of humidity.
Arequipa
Yeah.
region. Yeah, and then I went towards some. I was fed up with the sand. It was very beautiful in Nazca, for example. I hiked
Mm.
and bivvied and flew off this of the one of the highest dunes in the world. That was very beautiful, and a lot of beautiful, very unique adventures that you can't really have anywhere else, because Peru is so unique in the sense that
Hmm.
the desert is on the coast. It is
Yes.
pretty. It is because of a Humboldt current. It gets very dry there, and it is pretty unique environment when you can fly exactly the edge between one of the driest places in the earth and the biggest body of water on the earth. It is
Yes.
pretty unique.
Hmm.
And then when I started moving toward the mountains and flying and camping and some first in the Peruvian Alps in some it was still a little bit humid and the cloud bases weren't so high, but I started getting used to the altitude, and then I had a very beautiful adventure when I. Sorry, there's a helicopter flying above me. I hope it's not
Yeah, but
disturbing it much.
we can still hear you very well. Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Okay.
So I went hiked and flew off or climbed and flew off El Misti, which was almost 6,000
Mm.
it's almost 6,000 meter volcano, 5,900 something
Whoa. Hmm.
volcano. And then I really felt very hypoxic, and I was struggling there and suffering like a
Oh.
dog. And the wind was coming from the wrong side, and I got dragged all over this volcanic ash. And
Whoa.
and I was so dehydrated, and this was the kind of one of these moments when you really push yourself pretty hard, but still it's always so much better to fly off it
Yeah.
instead of having
Has-
to hike down.
Yes.
So basically it was this first month basically in Peru, um, was was full of this kind of smaller adventures, but still getting used to the environment and the terrain and the altitude too. And it almost feels sometimes in paragliding, you know, of course, I'm not coming out of nowhere. I already had this decade of chasing it pretty hard on the mountains in different places all over the world. But it almost felt too easy, like whatever I touched in Peru, whatever I pointed some dune or I pointed some mountain, and it's hike and fly of it, and it would all work out. And this is usual when you have to be very careful because, you know, you don't want to get too cocky. If you get too cocky in the sport, you can't be too shy because you will not get anywhere. But if you get too cocky in the sport, it will really bite you sooner or later. It will show, it will slap you in the face and show your place. So at some point, the local pilot from Chucky, the local pilot from La Paz, got in touch with me. I was like, "Oh, I saw that you are from a social media. We didn't know each other before. Social media. I saw that you are in Peru. You should come to Bolivia. We have these beautiful mountains to fly." I was like, "Well, okay, I'm already here. Let's go to Bolivia." So I went to Bolivia, flying on some beautiful islands on the lake on the way, and this is how I ended up in La Paz. And that was a great kind of great experience when it comes to flying higher terrain and generally being in the higher terrain, because La Paz itself is almost 4,000 meters. And I needed a while of like mountain biking around and just walking around and being in the mountains and flying and then hitching back or whatever, to get used to it and to feel comfortable with it, maybe 2 weeks. And then after that, I went for a little bivy, and this Volbivac ended up with apparently Bolivian overall distance record, which was only, if I remember well, around 100 kilometers. But the truth is, like, kind of open straight line, if you wish. But of course, it's not so much about the distance; it's more about the places that it takes you, and it takes you through the terrain that you know no one has ever flown before, and the places that are often that you don't necessarily want to land again. Not so much because there are glaciers below you, but because the valleys are so super deep and very long and very windy, and the air is big. That's not for faint-hearted. Not for faint-hearted. I like complex flying. So this is why I love New Zealand, but also this is why Andes really stole my heart, because it's so, especially when you fly in the proximity of Altiplano, you have this super high terrain. You have to switch your whole mindset that you have from other mountains because normally you think about the flatlands and mountains as a lower and higher terrain. Here it's basically opposite. You have the Altiplano, that it's like this never-ending flatlands, if you wish, the desert flatlands, which doesn't feel friendly at all, and they're higher, and then the mountains basically go down, valleys go down from it, and very deep, cutting into the terrain until they become very high again, the mountains, up to 5,000-6,000 meters. But then you're already in the regime of humid air coming from the other side, from Amazonian forest, from rainforest. So altogether, it becomes incredibly, sometimes it creates convergence, sometimes this air that's so humid, you can see this like thousands of meters of difference in the cloud base, and you're trying to navigate somewhere in between it. And on top of it, it's windy and it's dry and it's high, so everything happens fast. So definitely beautiful commuting terrain. In Bolivia, it's stunning. Of course, you have, especially around La Paz, you have very user-friendly places in the valleys around, and the beautiful kind of hike and fly area of Las Animas, which is like crazy sandstone towers. And there's a lot of beautiful flying that it's not necessarily so committing, but if you're looking for a big adventure, that definitely the Andes can deliver. So by any means, I'm not saying, oh, it's all like the European Alps. It's definitely not. And also the factor of like remoteness factor is, yes, very often you can see even very high, somewhere above 4,000 meters, you can see some settlements and you can see people living there. My Spanish is basically non-existing, so I tried pretty hard, but it was pretty hilarious. With one day, after a couple of days in the mountains, I basically ran out of food, and I landed somewhere at 4-5, left my gear glider and everything on the top, and just walk down to the kind of maybe 4 or 5 huts or houses that
Yeah.
were there. And everybody were running away from me. The children were hiding, and people were just like, what is like. And then someone told me that there is this legend of the
You can
woman
imagine
coming
that.
from the
Yeah,
mountains
yeah,
in the
coming
sunset.
down with
Yeah, they're trying to kidnap
head hair,
children. I was like, well, great. And here I am,
blonde
all
president.
in white. Yeah, coming out of nowhere, just
Yes.
with in my jacket, hands in my pockets, and trying to talk to people, trying to convince them to sell me some food. So yeah, this was definitely an epic adventure.
But
And I
did you
believe that
figure out at the
the
end? No,
mountains themselves.
but please, Stella,
Sorry.
did you figure out how to have some food in the end? They understood
Yes,
you. You could
finally,
have,
like
they were.
finally, at the very end of this little village, the older man who wasn't afraid of me gave me
Mm,
some potatoes and
oh,
some rib, some
cooked potatoes in
weird.
Bolivia. Yes, yes, they
Yeah,
have more than 16
yeah, it's a
kind
potato
of
country.
potatoes. Yes.
I have a pretty cool footage of it on my Instagram channel. If you guys scroll it until
Mm,
April, May, you can have a look how it looked like, because it was definitely this encounter was definitely one of these unforgettable adventures that only flying can take you. Because if I was backpacking around, if I was hiking, whatever, it will never take you to this random little place
yes.
high in the mountains where when they've never see strangers. There's
Oh,
it's not a tourist destination by any means. So
yeah. One of our
this
followers follow
encounters.
you. Yeah, one of our followers telling they here he was following you and he had seen that. And
I saw it. Yeah,
they let
I see it.
some people say that or we are known by being really warm people, reception, really warming the newcomers. But it seems you had a mix of that in Bolivia
Oh, I
and
had
Peru.
a
Oh no?
lot of beautiful encounters. I think it just
Ah, I
was
see.
so unusual, and these people who live there are so
Uh,
isolated
okay.
that they just kind of don't,
It
they
was
just
so
didn't even
strange,
really
right?
connect.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Mm,
it was just too strange and too scary for them. But
yes.
the people, my experience with people both in Peru and Bolivia was really amazing. People are very warm, very friendly,
Mhm.
very. The food was amazing, especially in Peru, and this kind of the way of celebrating little things, which is
No, cool.
Very South American approach to life, which is absolutely beautiful. That they can celebrate even like daily life.
Yeah.
Celebrate, every reason is good for celebration. I think we learn a lot from it in Europe, which is also serious and at moments even grumpy.
Definitely, we should explore more those countries. I mean, we Brazilian, we should be exploring more the Andes itself. Uh, um, Connected with that, Kinga, how it is to be a woman in this environment. You were flying alone, all these mountains in Europe, we could understand you may feel safer because, okay, you will have a civility, etc. In Andes, you will be more exposed to maybe not so very well oriented people. How you felt about that? Did you have some bad experience not only in the Andes but also in your life as a woman, adventurous woman in the world, exploring new places, being alone several times, into the wilderness? How you could you comment a little bit to our pilots how it is to be a woman in this still
Yeah.
male-oriented environment?
So now paragliding obviously is a very male-dominated sport. Some statistics say that worldwide, more than 90% of pilots are basically white men,
Well,
globally.
mm-hmm.
So there's not much diversity in sport in general, in particular not as many women as you would think that could pursue paragliding. And you can see that there's way more women starting paragliding. So on paragliding courses, and if you look at statistics of women being signed off as paragliding pilots, there's more of them. But then women who actually fly and pursue flying and fly cross country, flying competition, or pursue their own adventures, it's less and less and less of women in it. I really think that in a big part of it is how I've been and how other women have been treated around paragliding. it's a real mirror of how women are treated in general in social life. So if in places, and in particular in countries and places which have more equality and more female equality or female rights, it's kind of natural that you fly and you can pursue flying, and it's even if anything, it even makes you kind of special as a woman. Yeah. So it's
I
always
see.
easier. For example, in New Zealand, it's always easier to hitchhike back. Oh, a girl with a big backpack on the side of the road. It's easier for me to hitchhike back than for my male friends. But at the same time, I don't want to sugarcoat it. There's plenty of places in the world that are still, and also within more equal countries, there's plenty of people who still believe that women shouldn't do this or that, and I it's when I fly, I don't care,
I
and
see.
I think it's really at the end, when you flying is such a solo and independent, and you need such an independent mindset and trust and confidence and trust into your own decisions, that when it comes to flying, it really doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. No one knows in the sky
Yeah.
that you're a man or woman, and also it shouldn't affect your decisions in any way. Which I know that it does, and a lot of women have lower confidence and are discouraged more easily and process things differently. And I see it a lot when I coach male versus female pilots. I see that a lot of female pilots process setbacks and some failures or some mistakes that are inevitable. We all make mistakes, and we need to learn from them when we progress into our flying. But very often women process it very differently than men. Men have this better tendency of just shaking it off and saying, well, the wind came out of nowhere. Men are generally more keen to blame other factors, not themselves, for the failures. Women are probably are more inclined to beat themselves up and say, oh, I really screwed up. I'm not good at it, and I shouldn't be doing it because obviously I'm not a great
Speaking.
pilot. So, well, no one was born a great pilot. So it's normal to sometimes lose the confidence. It's normal that sometimes. So this is one
I
thing
see.
that I believe that maybe affect female in flying. And I also believe that it's not so much in nature that we are born this way, but we are groomed this way into social life, to be nice and pretty and smile, and not necessarily. And if we want something too hard, or if we show the same amount of confidence, determination, or cockiness, let's say, as guys. For guys, it's kind of good factor, or good. He's confident. He knows what he wants. And
Yeah,
for
it's
women,
all of
it's very often perceived
Mhm.
very differently perceived. So all this being said, I'm pretty particular. So, for example, there's a reason why I've never, despite being invited a couple of times, I never decided to come to Dubai for a competition that it's basically like a
I
promotion
see.
event for them, because I don't feel like necessarily endorsing
Sure.
the like a lot of pilots treat it as a cool free holidays, and nice adventure, but I don't feel necessarily like endorsing the particular
I see. The positioning about
state of
how to.
speeches, the position with my face, let's say, on it.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting for me, but I really believe that instead of like fighting the world as it is, we can lead by example and do stuff that we want to do as women. Also, not really thinking too much about what someone has
Yes.
to do, and it can be really empowering for our flying. But also, this flying journey, and probably most of pilots will agree that this paragliding progression and paragliding journey also changes you as a person. It can
Yes.
be very empowering, it can be very satisfying, can really have a massive impact on your life. So yeah, have I ever been sent back to the kitchen? Have I ever been asked, oh, isn't it too strong for you on the
Wow.
takeoff? Have I
Uh-huh.
ever been asked, oh, so you too fly? You too? Not only your boyfriend? Of
Uh-huh.
course I did.
Yes.
And you can treat it you can treat it
Hmm.
as a offense, but actually, to be honest, who cares?
Hmm.
As long like people who I care about are obviously very supportive and are
Hmm.
happy
Yeah.
to have any type of pilots around them as long as they share the passion. And the
Hmm.
paragliding can be incredibly inclusive sport, and I think it's our own interest to make a paragliding as inclusive as possible,
Hmm.
because it's like everywhere, this inclusivity and having different perspectives on different, let's say a lot of men could really learn a lot from a lot of women about dealing with fear and dealing with emotions and
Wow.
processing things,
Yes.
while
Yes.
a lot of men in paragliding until last few years it's changing in a good way, that men are
Hmm.
not so afraid to talk about the emotions, talk about the fear. When I started flying, I remember that whatever would happen, guys were like, no, they're like
Uh-huh.
never afraid. It's
I
never,
almost
nothing ever
died.
touched
Yeah, yeah.
them. Yeah,
I almost,
someone died, but
I'm
like,
so
what happened?
yeah.
You threw reserve on
I'm
this perfect day. Like, the wind came out of nowhere. The wings
no,
stopped
it's
flying.
never
That
my
wasn't
fault.
me.
Never
No,
my
I'm
fault.
good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. No problem. Yeah. So
So
it's
yeah.
good that we have different perspectives and different
Yep.
approaches to flying, because flying is not just about thermaling techniques and takeoffs and landings, but a big part of cross country flying really happens in our mind, and we kind
Yes.
of all agree to it. We all know that this is true, but at the same time, somehow we are not many pilots really are keen to work on the mindset and to really
Hmm.
look inside and think, okay, was it anxiety, or maybe I have some risk management
Yeah.
issues, and maybe I'm anxious about something, maybe I have some fear issues,
Yeah.
maybe I just have a really strong inner critic that's stopping me from flying, maybe this, maybe that, maybe I'm putting too much pressure on it. And
Sure.
for a lot of pilots, after mastering the basics, I can take off and land safely, I can thermal decently. Then if you want to fly new places, if you want to go for adventures, if you want to fly distance, all the rest is really in your head, and
Hmm.
how good
Hmm.
and safe the decisions you can make. So I
Yeah.
think we can all, the more different perspectives to this we can have, the more we can find something that will work for us. And I think it can benefit the whole paragliding community in general.
Whoa, Kinga, you shared so amazing inputs, especially regarding how the women can process the flight differently, and how it can come from their culture, and that is amazing. I hope that we could share that with more with all the
Absolutely. And
women's
I see
pilots.
it also not only with pilots who I coach and female pilot, male pilots that I work with, but also I see how I used to, when I came to the sport, how I used to process my
Yes, I see
my
that.
failures and my mistakes and my fear and anxiety that
Yeah.
pursued because of it, and how I process things now. But it was
Mm,
10 years of very constant work
maturity.
and pursue and push. So it means what it means, that we are not wired this way. We are
Yes.
not born this or that way. It's something that we
Yes.
learn on the way, and we can also unlearn the destructive parts and learn the good ways of managing
Yeah.
our flying. And this in return will have a really only good and positive impact on our life on the ground
Learn
and
life. Yes.
relationships
Yeah.
and our
And that
self-worth and pursuing any other goals that we have.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that that should impact also a lot of male pilots in the same way because they could criticize
Absolutely.
themselves too
Both of
much.
us.
So it's valid for everyone. I feel that as one of that kind of mental lessons. You see how to process it and how to deal with your uh, way of thinking on the flight that will impact you a lot, not only in the flight but also in the life, as you said. We are running out. Thank you a lot for sharing that. We'll try also later to cut parts of the best, the beautiful parts of the life. So to put that kind of translated, I'm sure
Oh,
that the
cool.
people will love it.
Yeah.
We are running out of the life, out of the time. So please, could you tell us maybe in a few minutes about how can we go to New Zealand? Sorry, I'm getting nervous here. How we can go to New Zealand to have lessons with Kinga, how it works, how many days, how it works on your side. If I would like to go to New Zealand, have some guided tours with you, bivouac trips. Just before that, just for you to know, we have women's encounters in Brazil. Several of them, women pilots, they organize good encounters mostly connected with cross country or recreative flights. And we have a bunch of good women's community. Michelle, who you met just before our interview, is
So
one of their leaders. Yes, so it would be amazing if you had the opportunity to explore more this topic about the women's into the sports. But not only that, I loved this thing about the way of thinking. But regarding New Zealand, some words about how we can be guided in New Zealand by Kinga, how it works, etc. Best time to be there.
yeah, so best time starts now for New Zealand, and our summer is basically from, I would say that from the beginning of December until the mid-March. This is probably the best time to come, with longest days being somewhere around Christmas and the beginning of January, and then into February and March it becomes a little bit calmer, but also more reliable, which is quite a common thing also for any mountains, that the same thing happens in the Alps, that spring can be, you can have a great day and then a week
Yes.
of wind and rain and whatever. Definitely in New Zealand we have more wind than rain, but also depending on the season we have some really beautiful, in particular La Nina season influences it. This year we have La Nina season again, which usually means a lot of good flyable low wind days. We can fly some
Hmm.
triangles up and distance. And I personally coach in 3 different areas, if you wish,
Okay.
in the European Alps, mostly in the Italian Alps. And last year, or this year, actually in September, I bought a house in Italy. So now we also
Yeah.
have a base,
That's
proper
why I get
base in.
confused where you were based. You see, because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
noticed that you had a house in Italy. Oh, but okay, let's
Yeah,
just
but a house in Italy that requires a little bit of paint work and a lot of
okay.
furniture because the big empty house. But it's also, the concept is to have a base, and it's kind of paragliding bed and breakfast for pilots who not only come for my coaching and my tours, but also pilots who don't necessarily want to be coached or guided, or don't want to afford it or can't afford it in some ways, but want to have this extra support of understanding, okay, where is the best, where could I fly today? When should I go? And what's possible? And what should I pay attention to? So
Where
have
it
this
is
kind of.
this where it is this hut? Your place
It's
where it
close
is
to
based?
Feltre,
Ah,
so it's
Felter.
close to Feltre. So it's kind of coming back to origins,
Yes,
where I started flying in Bassano. It's
yes.
35 kilometers from Bassano, 20 kilometers from Feltre, and 40 kilometers from Levico Terme, with
Okay.
some other beautiful flying places around, and of course Dolomites at the back.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a beautiful terrain, which is kind of like it is Dolomites. It's Dolomiti
Got it.
Bellunesi, but Dolomites are a big area, which is also pretty complex flying, which I love. We do every year. We do in summer, in July and August, we do 1 or 2 tours, which are Volviva clinics. These are 12-day Volviva clinics that
12
include,
days.
like, yeah, because it concludes like 6 days of cross-country flying and going through gear and weather and topography and a lot of information and
Oh,
as
got
much
it.
flying as possible. And then we have another 6 days when we actually stop being stationary, we pack and we go into the mountains and see where it takes
Oh,
us. Last year it took us all the way to Slovenia and back, almost back. So
wow.
um,
Slovenia. I have been
so,
there already.
so,
I had some
so,
flight there. Yeah.
yeah. So to fly there with a group of keen pilots in the Volvivac
Amazing.
style, it's also pretty special. It's a beautiful place to practice Volvivac flying. Then I have this post monsoon season in Himalayas, in Indian Himalayas, where I go every year, and I coach there too. And I always do one tour, both one on one and in Volvivac group.
Oh,
It's 10
okay.
day 10 day Volvivac kind of clinic
Wow.
in the Himalayas.
Okay.
And in New Zealand, for the last couple of years, I basically only coach either one-on-one or groups that already come together.
I
So
see.
a couple of
I
friends
see. Got
that
it.
come together, they know each other
And
because the
in Italy, how many in Italy you can create the groups, but not on Himalayas. In Himalayas, you prefer to have the groups already done, or
Himalayas,
one
I
to one.
still create a group. No, it's Himalayas. I
Oh,
still
okay, okay, okay.
create a group. Himalayas in October and the beginning of November are very reliable,
Okay.
and there's a lot of flying, so it's relatively easy if you wish.
Okay.
While New Zealand summer can be a little bit unpredictable or not
Mm,
obvious for
mm.
pilots to fly. So from my experience, it really helps massively if it's either pilots who already know each other, or if it's one-on-one.
Mm,
So then I have a full attention on my pilot, and we can really squeeze every day like a lemon.
wow.
Otherwise, there's a lot of
Mhm.
waiting. Someone lands somewhere, and then everybody
Yes.
basically have to land because there's no
Yes.
retrieve possible.
That's
Yeah,
how to you
etc. So the
how to be done.
logistics is different. This is why it really so right now, of course, sometimes a group of friends come from somewhere, or a couple or a group of friends come from somewhere, and then we can do it in New
What's the
Zealand too, because they already know each other and
mhm.
and and uh,
What's
and
the
understand, what's
maximum
involved.
number? The maximum number of the group, more or
So
less, just to have an
so
idea?
when I'm yeah, so when I'm alone, it's 4 pilots. It's my max.
Okay. Okay.
And it depends also, partially it depends how experienced the pilots are, because if they're
Yes.
a little bit fresher, they require a little bit more, as I call it, handling
Yes.
in the air. But if they are more independent already, just need basically, sometimes we have, sometimes I've had a couple of years ago, I had a group that basically were all very good experienced pilots. So basically to just point them in the direction and would all
And
fly
then do all the
together.
job.
And then it's all
That's cool.
very easy, of course.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so it really depends a little bit. And this is basically every single coaching session that I do. It's very different, and it's very dependent and tailor made for pilots that I'm coaching. This is why
Hmm.
I have a website that you can find more details on,
Please.
kingamashta.com. And then you can and then if anyone's interested, just flick me a message, and then we'll go through there. I usually ask a lot of questions about flying experience and goals and expectations and fitness level, a lot of things, and then we usually have a video chat so we can address different details and doubts and get to know each other a little bit, and then it helps me also plan the
Sure.
best way to address the pilot's needs, because every pilot is different. Some pilots I want to fly
Yes.
my first 100K, and some pilots I don't care about kilometers at all. I just want to camp in a beautiful place in the wild
Yes.
mountains. So it really depends on pilots and on their objectives. But
Yeah.
yes, New Zealand, definitely. I coach here I don't coach in November now because it's just still pretty unpredictable, and the weather
Mhm.
is just too complicated. So, but then from mid-December we coach, and most of it is
Okay.
1-on-1 or 2-on-1, or pilots coming together. So
Got
if
it.
you so what you mentioned, if you have already a little group or a couple of friends who would like to come together and explore New Zealand, I would be more than thrilled to
Oh,
accommodate it.
for sure. We will plan that. So you can be sure about this. And sounds really great, really personalized, customized course or guided. So that's really well. You are really connected with the pilots you are guiding. So that's a really important thing when we are looking for this kind of experience,
Just
right?
one, yeah, just one thing to add to it. At the end, it has to be like this. The only way that I,
Hmm.
I can imagine doing what I do, because they're not usually this typical cross-country safaris
Hmm.
type of things. If we are going into the mountains, especially wilder mountains, especially we are thinking about bivaque flying, there's a lot included in it, and you need to kind of understand your pilots and know what they
Hmm.
need, and very often also make some good decisions according to safety, because very often it means that we sleep in the mountains and no one really knows how they will feel after a night or 2 nights. Maybe they will get cold, or not sleep so well. Maybe they will get tired, and then it's a little bit windy. Is it windy? Is it too windy? Is
Hmm.
it good? Is it not? There's a lot of decisions to make. So I obviously help to make these decisions, but it's also very important that pilots feel safe,
Sure.
and feel safe, not only in the sense of physical safety, but feel also safe to voice their concerns, or simply say, well, I don't feel it, I don't want to do it, as I'm perfectly
Yes. Yes.
fine, we'll do something else.
Yeah.
So it's very important for me to keep my pilots safe, of course, that's the main thing, and then take them for some cool, epic, unforgettable adventures.
Wow. Okay, deal. I can sign that deal. I would sign that deal. And Kinga, really thank you very much again to make yourself available for
Thank you
us here at the
so much.
Brazilian community. I cannot
Thank you
finish
very much for
this.
inviting me. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure to talk
I
about
have
flying.
have to invite you to come to Brazil. Please let us know. We can
I would
provide information. Of
love
course,
to. It's been on my list for so long. I need
come
to
on.
finally make
We
it
have
happen. Yeah,
also hike and fly here. It's not only
I
distant
know.
flights on the northeast. We
I
have
know.
some smaller mountains, but some mountains, and we could have a lot of adventure. So you will be more than welcome. Thank you very much again. As soon as we have the translations, etc., we will share with you. Of course, it will
Amazing.
be okay. Thank you a
Amazing.
lot.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time. All the greetings from New Zealand to beautiful Brazil.
let's go. Bye bye. Have a great day. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Turma, para quem continua, então, aqui em português, a gente vai fazer a tradução da entrevista. Vocês vai dar um trabalhão, mas a gente faz a tradução depois. Também vai sair a matéria completa na revista Hike and Fly. Mas a gente vai tentar fazer alguns recortes com as legendas e tudo mais. Sobretudo, ela compartilhou bastante um pouquinho sobre as diferenças dos Andes, da Nova Zelândia e dos Alpes. Ela também deu um insight muito interessante a respeito de como a gente pode perceber o voo, no sentido de como o pensamento vai influenciar na performance do voo, de como as mulheres às vezes podem se criticar demais por uma certa insegurança nas decisões tomadas, mas eu acho que isso vale para os homens também de maneira total. Mas realmente ela compartilhou bastante, hein, Claudião? Valeu, turma. Foi muito legal. Vamos trabalhar na tradução. E obrigado aí por todo mundo vir. É muito legal o apoio de todos aí no Hike and Fly. Se não fôssemos juntos, não seríamos nenhum. Valeu? Boa noite, galera. Valeu, Porto. Valeu aí todo mundo que acompanhou. Obrigado, Cap, pela participação. A turma que colocou, participou bastante. É, essa turma que só voa, né? De terça-feira ainda, né, Cap? Valeu, Liginha, por toda a força, viu? Obrigado por acompanhar. Eu achei demais a entrevista dela, uma das melhores que a gente já teve. Nem deu tempo de falar dos X-Alps, né? Eu ia falar que a gente tinha aqui um piloto meteórico igual ela, aqui do. Bom, não deu tempo de falar, turma. Valeu. Valeu, Fábio. Obrigado, galera. Valeu, Adriano. Valeu, valeu, Luiz, da FI. Ela tava com a camiseta da FI, não sei se você notou. Obrigado, galera. Boa noite. Até a próxima aí. A próxima, vamos torcer para vir o Saladini. Deve ser a próxima entrevista aí nas próximas semanas. Obrigado. Valeu, Michele. Tchau, tchau, turma.